Okay, given that, let me give you an outline of what the first assignment is going to be. Assignment 1 is draw a box. This is just to get you going on the thing. It consists of some main program which reads in coordinates of the corners of the box. These are going to be in the coordinate space of the pixel array itself. Some of the integers between, typically between 0 and 511 or whatever range you like. You declare some array within your program, some reasonable size, just to test it out. So whenever the program reads in some data element from a data file, it will overwrite the appropriate things in the array. And then when the thing finally runs out of data, you write out the simulated frame buffer array. In the appropriate standard file format so that you can then run one of the post processors, which you will find out about shortly, to see the actual picture. And if you have several different boxes overlaid on top of each other, the later ones will just blot out the boxes that were there before. You want to do something like have your program check to make sure the coordinates that it reads out of the data file are in some reasonable range, so you don't, tread on things outside the bounds of the array, and all those pretty much standard things. And so this will basically do it for assignment 1. So you can actually start working on it conceptually, at least, even if you don't know the file format. This will at least get you going on the mechanism to make sure you have a computer account and so forth. Yeah.
This is a solid box as opposed to a line drawing, and is it square?
Solid box, and the coordinates, at least for this thing, we probably won't be using this code in the future, but have the coordinates be x left and y top and x right and y bottom. Basically the two-dimensional coordinates of the opposite corners of the box, and so there'll be arbitrary size boxes. It's just rectangular array within memory. Read sets of these numbers out of a file, overlay, and well, let me see, value, some intensity value. Overlay it into the array, keep doing that, and then write it out when you hit the enter file on the data file. I don't mean to make this extremely elaborate, but given this information, you should be able to construct what would be a reasonable solution to this thing. Again, this is just to get you going, to make a picture, to make sure all the mechanism works properly. So you'd have several different boxes potentially overlaid on top of each other if you wanted to. One other thing that we need to talk about briefly are books for the class. The sorts of stuff that we're going to be dealing with is sort of specialized, so there are not a lot of hardback books out on the subject. There's one that presumably you used last term in the introductory graphics course, which was Newman and Sproul's Principles of Interactive Computer Graphics. There are some other books that are similar to that, but Newman and Sproul is probably the best one for our purposes, although most of what we talk about in the class will be quite a bit beyond the level of depth that they go into. Now, even though there are no actual textbooks on the subject, there are a couple of very good books which consist primarily of reprints of relevant papers in the field. And the one that's probably best for this thing is called it's a tutorial in computer graphics published by the IEEE Computer Society, which we have on display here under the Magic TV camera. This might be in the bookstore. We sort of told the department that's what we expected to use for the course.
Everybody checked?
But I somehow doubt it. Things like this typically don't happen automatically. So
something's ordered. They have a list on the shelf. There were no books, but since something.
We're going to check to see what the situation is. They have Newman Sproul apparently. They ran out of the printing run ran out or something, so that might be the one that they're talking about being on order. The IEEE Computer Society has a outlet in Los Angeles, which is where I spend half my time, and I'm going to try to remember to check them out and see if I can just haul back a whole bunch of copies and just kind of sell them to you at cost, which is probably the most convenient way of doing it, rather than wait weeks and weeks for the bookstore to go through the process. This is the first of actually two different volumes. The next year after this came out, there was another similar book published by the IEEE Computer Society, which is more papers on the same topic, but this first one is probably the most interesting to you. There are several other books that we can recommend that you get if you're hot to build up your library on it. Typically, the conference that presents most of the interesting and recent results in computer graphics is called SIGGRAPH, which is it's a division of the Association for Computing, ACM, and they have all these special interest groups, and they're called SIGGRAPH and SIGGRAPH, and there's one called SIGGRAPH, which is the special interest group on computer graphics. They publish a quarterly little journal of various interesting tidbits, but every summer there's a conference, and papers that are presented at the conference are published as one of the issues of this SIGGRAPH report. Those are good things to get a hold of, and you can write off to SIGGRAPH if we can come up with an address for them sometime in the near future to get copies of those as well. Also, we're probably going to wind up handing out bunches of pieces of paper on certain things that might not be easily accessible to you as well. Anything else we need to do?
ARG.
I'll just see. Oh, there's 2 minutes.
Okay. Show and tell?
I guess so, yeah.
All right.
I hand the microphone over to Dr. Catmull.
You can flip that
After
button.
these things are blank, we will presume that you can come anytime, right?
Like so? That's better? Okay, the first thing we're going to do is show some videotapes. Is this on? The videotape, the first one was made at the New York Institute of Technology. We will tell you more about that place later on, as well as, and some things Jim did were done at JPL. New York Institute of Technology has been making cartoons for the last 6 years, and this is a sampler of little pieces out of that. Could you roll the tape, please? Now, some of these are painted on the computer and then mapped onto surfaces and rotated around and manipulated in various ways. It would be hard to explain all of the techniques used. Here's something two-dimensional mapped on something three-dimensional. There'll be sound in the middle of this. Now, some of these pieces will appear later in the film, and they can give you an interesting contrast between the quality on video and the quality on film at the same resolution. This is that was bicubic patches. This is just a warping program. It's very nice to have frame buffer sitting in front of you. You can see what's happening as you're creating them. Unfortunately, we don't have enough frame buffers to allow that here. The same background will appear later on in a Chevrolet commercial. In fact, the Chevrolet commercial was aired in Canada last year, or the year before, I forget which. This was just testing out a hidden service algorithm with anti-aliasing and multiple light sources. Now, this was animated on a picture system. It was the first thing that was animated, though we've since done much better work than this. That's a little rocket ship It's got motion blur in it. I did that just before I came to Lucasfilm to show them how to do motion blurs. And there's the quadrant patches. A strange thing that was painted in depth as an experiment. Not a very successful experiment, I might add. This doesn't have a soundtrack. It was originally made for Western Electric. It represents some building which is in Pittsburgh. The reason there's no soundtrack is that it was made as a promo piece to sell something to some Arabian government. I don't know whether or not they ever bought it. This was a part of a test which was made for altered states. They didn't use that, obviously. This was hand-drawn paper, scanned in using a camera, and then painted on the computer. The background was painted on the computer at different levels. You notice the front level is moving slightly different than the back level. And then it dissolves into a scene where the computer did the automatic in-betweening. This was part of a little animated scene called The Rooster. It has now been completed, but it's a silly story, so I won't show the whole thing. This is just a little test piece taken out of it. This was the first thing that the animators used on the automatic in-betweening system. Now that's kind of embarrassing because that's been on the air more than anything else, and it can have been done anyway. Certainly didn't have to be done by a computer.
A toad, a road, a whale, a nail, an easel, a weasel, a duck, a buck, a minx, a sphinx, a lynx, a rinks, a rose with thorns, a spider with corns, an ape and a callus, a grave in a palace, a taper, some paper, a moose, a goose, a bat, a rat, a hat, a cat, even that. It's so crazy!
I have to have an animal.
You've never seen one of them, have you?
Well, the first stuff you saw had automatic in-betweening. This doesn't.
beside the...
Every line drawing was scanned in. It was just colored on the computer.
Animal be?
How bad? Listen. I saw that one yesterday. It's full grown now. You should have seen it when it was a baby.
This is from Puss in Boots, which was a stage play, and the soundtrack was taken from the stage play. And this is just a test that was made for that.
Of a beagle, of a horn, of a moose, and it wiggled, and it wobbled, and it shivered, and it shook.
What was it?
I don't know. It had the face of a donkey, and the
Okay, could you cut the tape, please?
it had the...
What?
How's it turn out?
I don't know. I've seen it before. Next tape. The next one has got on it a piece. It wasn't quite finalized, but they gave it to me as much as they had at the time. Of a piece that was done entirely with automatic in-betweening, and the fellow who did it is in love with the system, which is nice. He claims it into the work of 5 animators and 5 assistants and 5 in-betweeners.
So digitizing the image isn't seen as a big burden?
No, it can go either way, but this one he actually is drawing on the machine. You see it up on not a picture system, but it's like a picture system. This is now?
Yeah.
I think there's one more little piece on here. Well, that was actually done out of 3-dimensional. It was done with a 2-dimensional in-between system. And that's probably it with that tape. All right, and then finally, we'll show a film. Looks to me like it stays where it isn't.
Thursday seems to be how much do I sometimes here. I don't know how many people do unhappy about this, but how many people
Yeah, I wish they would like it is. You want to turn the sound off on that? No, there's no sound. All right, let's just focus on that.
Giving the AV guy a run for his money on this.
Hey, that wasn't on film. On the videotape.
No.
Shoot, you got the most up-to-date copy. This was scanned in and modified. Now the gorilla is not real. Focus is still out. No, the focus is way out on this. Pass to it. And here you can see arrows all over the place. It was more because it had the incorrect color map. That's a long lecture. It's all the bad things you see in the picture, except for the story.
How much resolution?
That's 512 resolution. I always have 512 resolution.
What's the...
The first one's out of focus, but for those in focus, they look much better here at 512 than they do in video. This is not because of... most of the problems you see with television don't have anything to do with the resolution. They have to do with the NTSC encoding.
Yeah, I noticed the aliasing with the chromosome carrier on the tape. What's the relationship between the animation automation and getting that sort of photographic-like realism, things like Fantasia? I noticed most of the cartoons were not anything like that. But that's probably just because it's a lot harder to do stuff like that. You know, flames that look real and drops splattering and that sort of thing.
Do you have a bat on this?
The what?
The bat with the Fantasia background?
Oh, no, I don't. It's on a different piece of film. It's all been put together in one place. Now, this is the same thing you saw before. There's a whole piece on this one, and it was not on my demo tape for some reason.
This is Albie Smith?
Yeah. Well, the artist for this, it was Ed Emschwiller, who's the chairman of sound and video and film at Cal Arts. Well, that's it on the film. When it rewinds onto that reel, it's a sticky reel. It sometimes gives problems. Okay, any questions before I turn this over to Jim?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I was, I guess that's... I was wondering before if the in-betweening would help to do, you know, super realistic animation or not. If there was
No, it's very stylized. It's very, automatic in between is stylized, has that kind of look to it. On our stuff, there are a lot of techniques, and we will cover most of those techniques in the course, so that you'll be able to achieve your lifelong ambitions of making commercials. Okay, Jim.
It's interesting sometimes at computer graphics conferences when people get together to show their latest works, quite often it's like a commercial affair. People sit around in a room for 2 hours looking at things that are mostly TV commercials, which happens to be what the major monetary market for computer graphics is these days, because in TV commercials, the production cost of the commercial is generally totally lost in the noise of the time to buy the airtime to play the commercial. So they can afford ridiculous amounts of money per second of viewing time in order to produce the commercial. May as well go ahead with the film as soon as it's ready there. The things that I'm going to show are a couple of things that I've done and one thing that somebody else has done who also now works at Lucasfilm. The first film, I believe, is an animation of spacecraft flying by planet Saturn, which I did at JPL last year. JPL is in the business primarily of sending unmanned space probes to the outer planets and some inner planets. And so I've been making animations of what it would be like to be riding along with a spacecraft and kind of see what it sees along the way. This is a computer-animated countdown clock. The idea here is that all the editing of the film is done in the computer. This is at the time that I expected to go and work for Lucasfilm, so I thought I'd get a practice in. This is also all done at 512 resolution, although the image quality here is not quite as good as what Ed showed in his 512 resolution things, because he has a color film recorder. It's a fairly high quality device. These are all pictures that are photographed off the face of a color TV monitor, similar to what you're seeing at the front of the room. Camera sitting on a tripod and all the lights in the room off. So the picture is a little bit fuzzier than it needs to be. One of the things that's perhaps not too apparent in the production of any of these animated sequences is the amount of time it takes to actually run the programs once they're written. Something like this generally takes in the vicinity of 5 to 10 minutes a frame for most of these computers. This is all running on a PDP-11 model 70 or 55, that general flavor of machine. So the production of a sequence like this, which is almost 5 minutes continuous, it took about 3 weeks running 24 hours a day to calculate all the frames for this movie. We had 2 computers that one of them was used about half the time and the other one used most of the time, so that it was it's on the average about 3 weeks. Different modes of operation in terms of the production of frames are used, I guess, at New York Tech and here. In this case, all the frames were generated and written out to magnetic tapes, and so it's about 15 tapes worth. Once you have the frames like this, you can do editing effectively in the computer, and that's how the title sequence is put in and the animated countdown clock and so forth. Frames can be recalled and overlaid and averaged together in different ways to do crossfades. So when you actually expose the film, there's just one pass of film through the machine, and you don't have any of the manual editing steps involved. We're trying to make this a little bit slicker at Lucasfilm, although some of it was a little bit hard to use with facilities that I use at JPL.
Are the planet surfaces real?
The planet surfaces here are hypothetical, because this movie was made about a month before we got there. We didn't really know what the surfaces of the moons looked like, although we had a pretty good idea what the surface of Saturn looked like, because we had some fairly early photographs of it. So the Saturn map is pretty close to real.
Those rings aren't rotating, the bands aren't rotating in different
speeds, are they?
The bands are not rotating at different speeds in this particular thing, although, like the cloud of particles, they're randomly placed particles that are all rotating at the right differential rotation rates.
Was this the film that they showed?
This was, yeah, this is a film they showed. This is one of maybe 5 different films that I made at JPL on different flybys. Each one of them is, they make a bunch of copies and release it to the news media, and so sometimes you see it on national TV if they think it's more important than who got murdered today.
That the sparkling on the night side is...
That's something we will discuss later on in the term. The mathematical models used to simulate this thing are very accurate geometrically. You're seeing exactly what you would see if you were with a spacecraft at any particular time. All the orbital trajectory information is taken from the mission planning crew, and the positions of the moons are correct. And the star background is all taken from a database of all the stars down to 6 magnitudes, so those are real star locations. The simulation of the ring particles is something that I was prying out of various articles, and is a fairly good simulation of clouds of particles and how they reflect light, which sometimes does somewhat strange things. Quite often when you simulate reality too closely, things don't look right, and you quite often have to explain to people why it is that it would really look that way when they expect that it would look like something else. This particular maneuver here was what they had planned to send the spacecraft to actually do this sequence of maneuvers to reorient the antennas to do some magnetic field measurements. You can see a little gold record going around on the side too. And this is what actually happened in the real thing.
Is this half speed?
The speed that we're playing this in relation to real time is much faster than half speed. The entire movie is about 2 days worth of real time. There was a little bit of fiddling around we had to do then in order to compress and stretch out time in different ways. For example, spacecraft rotations, if you speed those up by the factor of 50 or whatever it is, the thing would just go like that and you wouldn't see anything. So there's a little bit of artistic license taken in the timing of certain things. May as well go straight to the next film if we can get that popped up there.
I noticed in one of the sequences the camera pans away from the spacecraft and the screen moves in a very jumpy...
That's in order to get the basic idea of it. Certain parts of the movie that moved quickly, I then went in and recalculated the intermediate frames, so some parts of this thing are single framed, some parts of it are double framed. Certain of the fast motions I didn't have time to single frame, and so some of the jerky motions with things were moving are a little bit too fast to get away with that. That's one of the aspects of human perception and animation in general, which we expect to talk about a little bit later on in the term, is when and by how much you can get away with single and double framing. Usually you try to single frame as much as possible, but it's at 5 minutes a frame, you quite often can't do the whole thing like that. Yeah?
What other debugging techniques do you use, like running at a decreased resolution or what other kinds of work?
If we get a chance, there's a videotape after this next film which shows a little bit of the process involved in making the film itself. Basically, there is a line drawing version of the movie which plays back kind of directly in real time that you can watch on one monitor to get the motions right. And it's a bit jerky because it has to do all these celestial dynamics calculations for each frame. But you block out the thing in general on some sort of line drawing model where you can twist knobs and adjust the positions of things until you get the size and position of what you like right. And then you say, now take your 5 minutes to draw the frame. On some occasions, with some practice of the program, you can just type in the numbers to the shaded image picture and get something reasonable, but that's certainly not the ideal situation. The next film was made by Lauren Carpenter at Boeing Commercial Airplane Company or something like that, which is an illustration of what Ed talked about, fractals. Fractals are mathematical means of dealing with random numbers that give you realistic looking shapes. primarily of interest for mountain ranges and things like that. But they can be used to simulate other things. He's got some fractal lightning bolts and so forth in there as well.
This has sound.
This has sound. The sound is basically background music. It'd be nice to have it if possible, but it's not crucial. Standard will focus on that too. Computer graphics classes and demos typically run the AV crew ragged because you're always jumping back and forth. Which we'll also get into a little bit later on in the class. Was made, as I understand it, primarily by mail. Lauren calculated the frames one at a time, and each time a tape full came up, he mailed it from Seattle back to Minneapolis or something like that, where Dicomod was, and they collected all these things together and filmed them. And so this is an even more torturous process, I think, than the previous things. The next thing I want to put in is a videotape. So I'll have somebody start setting that up. One of the things that you can be impressed by with a lot of this stuff is just the amount of time and effort it takes to do this. Computer graphics and computer animation in general is not easy and takes a long time. Lance Williams to say, if you want to do computer animation, you better bring lunch. This has sound on it. This is a sequence out of the Cosmos television production, which was hosted by Carl Sagan. This is the billions of nucleotides in the cell.
Language of life in the DNA molecule.
Maybe we might do better without the sound. I don't know. This was a 3.5 minute thing of DNA replicating.
A machine with about 100 billion moving parts called atoms. There are as many atoms in one molecule of DNA as there are stars in a typical galaxy. The sequence of nucleotides, here brightly colored, is all that's passed on from generation to generation. Change the order of the nucleotides, and you change the genetic instructions. DNA must replicate itself with extreme fidelity. The reproduction of a DNA molecule begins by separating the two helices. This is accomplished by an unwinding enzyme. Like some precision tool, this enzyme, shown in blue, breaks the chemical bonds that connect the nucleotides and bind...
This shows a fundamental problem of color reproduction. Actually, that was purple on the original film. I'm not sure why you got the name blue. but probably on a monitor he was looking at, it
Each
came out
helix
blue.
copies the other, supervised by special enzymes. The organic soup inside
Well, the two different enzymes, different colors, to emphasize that they were different.
The
So,
enzyme recognizes an approaching nucleotide and clicks it into place, reproducing another rung in the double helix. When the DNA is replicating in one of your cells, a few dozen nucleotides are added every second. Thousands of these enzymes may be working on a given DNA molecule. When an arriving nucleotide doesn't fit, the enzyme throws it away. We call this proofreading. On the rare occasions of proofreading error, the wrong nucleotide is attached and a small random change has been made in the genetic instructions. A mutation has occurred. This enzyme is a pretty small molecule, but it catches nucleotides, it assembles them in the right order, it knows how to proofread. It's responsible in the most fundamental way for the reproduction of every cell and every being on Earth.
okay, we can probably axe that.
That enzyme and DNA itself are molecular machines with awesome powers.
We can kill this one and probably get ready to start the next videotape. This particular sequence took even longer because the algorithm used to make each frame was something fairly new in order to get the blobby, squishy effect. And it took upwards of 45 minutes or an hour for some of the frames in that sequence. As a result, I had to panic and run around to all my buddies at JPL and on campus and scrounge free machine time. We had upwards of 5 different computers all running on the thing simultaneously for a 3-week period of time. Fortunately, with computer animation like this, it's feasible to do things in parallel because you just have one computer do frames 1 through 200 and another computer do frames 200 through 400 and so forth. And then you have to do this giant merge operation afterwards. But
Next laboratory, we have 2 different types of displays that we use.
this is a very crude, rough demo that I gave of the computer graphics laboratory, and there are lots of cuts and flubs and so forth in there. But this will give you a kind of a live idea of what's going on.
Look like. The display on the right is where the final picture comes out.
This is a JPL.
It makes a picture up of a lot of little spots. There's something like 512 spots by 480 across the screen. Each spot has a color attached to it, and in order to make a picture on that, the computer has to store a number in each spot. Color pictures take several minutes to calculate, and so this is only done once we have a line drawing image of a particular viewing position that we'd like to see. In order to set up a picture on the line drawing display, we have to tell the computer various things about the image we want to see, the distance we are from the spacecraft and the direction we want to look in and so forth. Now let's go down. We begin with the simulation of the Saturn system and the moons. We're looking down on the top of Saturn here with all the moons orbiting it, and the Voyager spacecraft coming in from the upper right. The program simulates the celestial dynamics for the moon motions so that it can figure out at any time in the mission where the moons are and at any time in the mission where the spacecraft is. This particular view is fairly simple to see the global motions of everything, but we can get much more interesting views by taking advantage of the 3-dimensional nature of the mathematics. Instead of looking down on the top from a great distance,
Computer noises.
we can situate ourselves riding along with the spacecraft, sort of looking over its shoulder with Saturn in the background. The computer then calculates the view that you would see if you're sitting about 50 meters away from the spacecraft and looking in the direction that causes Saturn to show up off in the distance. Now, all of these views can be adjusted somewhat just for aesthetic appeal.
by twirling some knobs, we can change the distance we have from the spacecraft to get closer to it or farther away, and we can change the direction that we're going to look in so that Saturn is no longer centered on the screen, but it's kind of off to the side. In order to make an animated movie of this, we basically have to set up several different key frames along the mission by adjusting the knobs in this way to make the positions of things look aesthetically appealing, and then the computer can figure out the in-between frames for the interpolation of the in-betweens to make a smooth movie as it flies through the Saturn system. Next, what we need to do is to draw a picture of this thing on the color monitor. We begin by clearing the screen and begin by clearing the screen and putting the star database up. We have all the stars down to 6th magnitude. It's about 6,000 stars, and it puts those up in their proper locations. So there'll be real constellations in there if you know what to look for. Then sorts all the objects. Oh, hell. left tape. Okay. Make a picture on the color monitor. We start out by clearing the screen and drawing in the star background. The stars database that we have is all the stars down to 6th magnitude. It's about 6,000 stars. So these are up there in their accurate location.
You might get the impression I've given this demo about 800 million times before as well.
It sorts all the objects that it sees in the order back to front. So we draw the farthest away things first. This is called a painter's algorithm. It's the way painters paint pictures. And the idea is that if something is drawn last, it will overlay or obscure whatever happens to be behind it. The first object in this case are some of the moons. Those come up as little dots. And then the next object is Saturn. Draws Saturn in 3 pieces. Draws the far part of the rings first, and then overlays the disk of Saturn on top of that, and then it draws the near part of the rings. This is so that in certain views, part of Saturn obscures the rings and part of the rings obscure Saturn, so we have to make that come out properly. The dark stripe you see across Saturn is the shadow of the rings on the surface. Calculates that by figuring out the distance between Saturn and the light and where it would hit the surface. I'm drawing the moon Titan here. When it's drawing these pictures, it's calculating for each spot on the screen what the latitude and longitude would be that you would see. And then it's looking this latitude and longitude up in a digitally stored map of the color of the surface. And it picks the color out of that location on the surface as the color in the object. And it then does lighting calculations to find out which direction the sun is coming from to shade the image properly. The final thing it draws is the spacecraft itself. That's described to the computer as a collection of small little polygons. The thing is built up out of about 750 polygonal facets, which can be shaded in and turned around in different directions so you can see the spacecraft from any view. If you get real close to it, you can see the individual polygonal shapes, but at this distance, they all kind of blend together to give the proper general shape of the image. Now, a whole image of this sort takes between 2 and 10 minutes to calculate. In order to make a movie, we have to calculate several thousand of these things. So the computer generally calculates for a week to 2 weeks at a time, running around the clock in order to generate all the frames for a movie sequence. Can you cut for a second? The patterns on the surfaces of the planets are described by maps. The maps are stored away in the computer as an array of numbers. This is the map for the surface of the Earth. These maps come from 2 different locations. We can either have them mathematically represented, either from data or photographs that we got of planets that we've already been to, like Jupiter and its moons, or we can have hypothetical maps stored away and generated by an artist of artist conceptions of what the surface might look like. In this case, you can see the surface of the Earth and the familiar continents on there to give you an idea of the context. And at the bottom of the screen is 3 sample views being drawn. This is, the artist uses this when he's drawing in a hypothetical map in order to sort of check his work to make sure that the positions and the size of the things are coming out the way he wants them to. And pause for a second while this thing's coming up if you want to. The places we've been, we have maps already stored away based on the photographs that have been sent back. This is the map of the surface of Jupiter. This was generated by processing photographs in somewhat the reverse manner of making the images that we do for the movies. That is, it takes an existing photograph and it picks up each pixel off the thing and spreads it out into the map, into the proper projection. By taking several different images, as in this case Jupiter rotates, and mosaicing them together, we can get a complete map of the surface. In addition to the surface of Jupiter, we have some of the moons. This is Io, and this is Ganymede. And once we have this database, we can make pictures of these moons from any direction, and they would look pretty much the way the real moon looks. For those places that we have not been yet, we have to have an artist draw in a hypothetical map. This is done using a program which allows you to paint things directly onto the screen using a digital stylus. See the little spot of light moves around on the screen as I move the pen around on this tablet. When you press down on the pen, it starts leaving a trail of color behind. You can draw pictures on here pretty much manually, just the way you would with pen and ink on paper. The boxes down at the bottom of the screen represent the color palette we can use. These were selected to represent the colors that we're going to see mostly on Jupiter and Saturn. Pretty much oranges and white colors are mostly the colors that are there. By positioning this little pointer over a particular color and pressing down, we can select that as being the current color of our simulated paintbrush. So we can make bright orange things, or white things, or dark gray things. Now when we're painting in an image like this, the top half of the screen then represents the map. We generally start out with some neutral background color. And then we can paint some hypothetical features on the surface. Cracks and canyons and so forth. To make the brush the teeny weeny little spot for fine details, or a large region for coloring in large areas. Now this particular painting mode represents like opaque paint being painted on it, compared to obliterates that used to be there. Have an airbrush simulation so that you can make cloudy effects rather than completely covering what was there. That averages the colors together. There's another mode where you can look at the picture in detail. Pixel paint lets you zoom in on the picture to see the individual spots, the individual pixels. And you can track around to look at the details of the picture. Or you can find a blank area and draw in some new picture at fairly high resolution. You have control over the individual pixels that you want. You can make cloudy areas or little faces and so forth. So when you shrink the thing down, you can see the thing I just drew in at fairly crisp resolution down in the bottom center of the screen. Another mode is called rubber stamp mode, where you can pick up a picture on the screen and stamp down copies of it. Pick up a little cloud of dots, you get sort of a stipple brush effect to make snowstorms and irregular terrain that way. Another mode you can use to change the colors of things by selecting a new color and pointing it where you want it to change, and it will go around and find the area that you pointed at and change everything in that area to the new color. Finally, there is a crater simulator so that you can make craters on the surface of your moon. This calculates out a combination of things. It will do some distortion on the crater to compensate for the distortion of the map projection that we're using, so that you make circular craters no matter where you're pointing. If it's near the poles, it has to be stretched out, and if it's near the equator, it has to be round. It also does lighting simulation, so you can see the light looks like it's coming from around the center here, which represents the equator, and the crater up here at the top is going to be bottom lit, and the crater down here on the bottom is going to be top lit. Vary the size of the craters at the higher little ones. And then at any time, the artist can make some sample images of the planet that he's drawing, kind of check his work. This is important to make sure the size of things come out correct. In particular, near the poles, we have to make sure that the image towards the top and the bottom of the hypothetical map is stretched out appropriately, because some of the trajectories fly over the poles, and it's easy to have the things look like they're puckered up oranges near the poles if you don't draw the picture correctly. Yeah, you can pause now. And one on the right-hand side is the eastern hemisphere, and one on the left side is a view looking down on the North Pole. Looks like it has a pie slice taken out of it, and that's because I wasn't careful in this case to completely draw in the neutral gray area all over the top of the screen, so part of it was left black. Okay, that's it for that. Insert shot here. The results of the poll for when the class have to meet seem to indicate that Tuesday and Thursdays, each hour period has at least 4 people are doing something else in it. Monday and Wednesday afternoon are about the same shape. It begins to look like we might be better off just leaving the whole thing as it is, unless anybody has particularly violent objections to that.
That means that the whole class will be taken.
Oh, so
Yeah. Right.
it'll mean what?
Means the class will still be on tape.
Yes.
Yes, does not mean you can stay home and sleep and just look at all the tapes just before the final, however.
And the library tape, though, will probably not be around very much because we're making copies of it. We will have taken it away.
This particular time does overlap essentially every invited talk.
Well, people didn't write down specifically when they were. Not too many people wrote down Monday and Wednesday at 3:30 as being one of the times they didn't want to come. So I don't have a good feeling for how many people would really like to have this at another time. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's kind of equal to the amount of people who will be inconvenienced by moving it to any other time, it seems. So
You've already selected against it.
that's true. Although we don't have too many people in the class anyway. We've got 27 people turning questionnaires.
Yeah, next, if anybody hasn't, if they're coming late, we've got this question that needs to be answered. And next week, we will have a list of those people who will be allowed to use the machines. Some people may just want to sit in, that's fine. But only some will be allowed on the machines because of the limited resources.
What is the dot from?
Well, we got to figure out what the resources are.
We'll use the backs. Like, classes really aren't supposed to use the
We have got permission to use some of the resources. All right, but there are limitations, but we do have permission. And that's part of the limitation, is they don't want 30 people coming in and flooding it. The file format will make it a lot easier because you only have to write to a file. And then you can do a level on the very end as an example, or just, whatever happens to be available you can use.
I think there's a process that'll let you put the thing you start on a line printer with overstrikes and so forth. So for debugging, it's better to get a quick picture in 5 minutes on a line printer than to get a beautiful picture in 2 days on a fancy device, generally. So you're not in too bad shape. I've found in the past that debugging a lot of elaborate or even not too elaborate raster graphics type programs, you spend a lot of your time having the program print out.